let's just check in. Where are you guys joining us from today? Just give us some of those locations so we can see the footprint of where everyone's from. Nicole from Waterfall in Johannesburg, Lynn Johannesburg, Edson from Zimbabwe, welcome Edson. Peter Maritzburg, Free State, Swaziland, Mercy of Santon, Namibia, Cape Town, Palabora, Joburg. There's faster than I can read. There's a Swaziland, Swatini, and then in Namibia. Great. I see a Krugersdorp, I see a Durban. Not a lot of Durbans. Okay, good. So all around the country and some of you outside of the country. I know we had a Zimbabwe, we had a Swatini, we had a Namibia. Okay, suddenly see where Durban Central. I imagine if I look out my window, I can probably see Durban Central. So I'm just a bit north at the moment. Good, fantastic. Okay, so people from all around the place. Once again, I see a number of names that I recognize from the previous webinars. We've had a couple of these already now this year and then towards the end of last year. So very warm welcome to all of you. I see a few more from Cape Town, Gauteng, Maxwell, Naomi, and welcome to everybody. Welcome back to those of you who joined us before. So good to have everyone here today. We're up to 100 participants. I think that's a really good place to get started with the webinar today, which is, as you see, on mindset. So we're going to speak a little bit about what mindset is, why it matters, what's important about it, what are the different types of mindsets that are out there, and how do you go about taking ownership of your own mindset and why that's important. Those are the few things we're going to discuss today. As usual, please feel free to chip in as we go. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat as I normally do, just to see if there's any questions coming up, but there will always be time for Q&A of this session as well. We have an hour, so just before 1:30, we'll have some time for Q&A. So if you have any questions that you don't want to ask during the webinar, feel free to leave it to the end as well. Either is good with me. I keep an eye on the chat as much as I can as we go. It's not distracting for me. I'm not getting any notifications there. It's really my choice to check in or not. So don't hesitate to put anything there. It doesn't distract me at all. It just means sometimes I might miss the comments that are there, but I'm going to do my best. I do that because it's quite nice to have an interactive session as much as possible over this forum. So that's why I encourage your continued participation. You don't have to wait for the Q&A, but of course you can. So yeah, my name is James Sturdee. I am a registered psychological counselor. I am a part of the Region Business School Counseling Services. I do a lot of student counseling and workshops, staff counseling, and workshops as well. A lot of you wouldn't be familiar with me now just because I've done a few of these webinars with you. So welcome back. If anyone is interested at any point of setting up a counseling session with the Region Business School Counseling Services, the email address is there on that page, counseling@region.ac.za. Feel free to send an email through at any point. This is completely free for registered Region Business School students. And it doesn't have to be academic related as well. It can be linked to any type of personal psychological challenges you're having. If you just need something to unpack something with or speak through something, or you're experiencing any type of challenge, this is a service that's available for you guys. This is such an important part of making sure that you are well emotionally and physically. So that kind of ties into these webinars that we're having as well. We are talking about 21st century skills, which are the soft skills, if you will, that we have that allow us to navigate what is a rapidly changing and evolving workplace, whole set of new demands that are on graduates these days and the workforce generally, the ability to be able to work really well remotely and in teams, to be able to use things like creativity, digital skills, but also these psychological skills, and we covered a couple of them in terms of emotional intelligence, goal setting, and we'll continue to cover more as we go. We're talking about mindset today, and we'll be talking about mindfulness later this month, towards the month. Okay. Just as is being pointed out there in the chat, there is going to be a recording of this webinar available at the end of the week as per usual. So I know that's something that people often ask about. Just a point that this full webinar will be available as we speak. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mindset. Like many of these terms and psychological terms and 21st century jargon, there is a kind of common understanding of what it is. These are words that we're often familiar with, but we don't often ever take time to unpack and talk about what they really are. So that's going to be part of what we're doing today. So what are we talking about? If we're talking about mindset, what this is, it's the way that we see ourselves and the world. So it's our viewpoint, it's our perspective, it's the way we kind of position ourselves both internally and externally. So that's, you can think about instead of beliefs, kind of system of beliefs. And this is sometimes hard to unpack the difference between what is a belief and what is a mindset. Because belief is kind of idea we have about the world. The belief is often as kind of a single idea about a certain thing, whereas mindset is a combination, a system of these different beliefs, and then how that affects the way that we would approach a certain situation, or how that would affect the way that we approach certain parts of ourselves. So it's a set of beliefs about our own lived experience, about what our worlds are like and what our internal psychological experiences are like as well. So this can refer again internally, which is our perspective on our traits, our personality traits. What type of person do I think I am? What is my mindset towards my own abilities? What is my mindset towards my own intelligence? Do I believe that I'm rarely gifted, or do I believe that I'm not? Do I kind of see academic challenges as something that I'm able to do? Do I feel academically orientated? This is an idea of mindset and how it's positioned towards ourselves internally, our own psychology. But then also, it's our external viewpoint. So how do we think about life generally? How do we think about adversity? How do we think about challenges and problems in life? How do we think about the relationship that we're in? How do we think about people? How do we generally experience people? Do we see them as trustworthy or not? For example, that is, or those are all examples of different types of mindset. And importantly, these are not just academic considerations. So what this means is it's not just these kind of interesting theoretical ways of thinking about the way that we think, but they have very real world consequences. So very real world consequences. They have real implications for what it means to be successful in any area of our life, and have very real implications for what it means to be emotionally well. And as you'll see as we go through this webinar, also, interestingly, it has implications for what it means to be physically well as well. And we've spoken about this in, I think, the goal setting webinar. We spoke a little bit about the dance between our biology and our psychology, so our bodies and our mind, brain, and the physical mechanisms that make them up. Mindset is very powerful in that sense as well. It's not just related to our psychology, which is our mind. It's related to the way we actually are able to be healthy and well generally. So that's something we're going to come back to as we go. I saw a hand, but I think that we might have been an accident. If there are any comments, just put them in the chat. Okay. Okay, so this webinar is going to draw on two different theorists today. So two psychologists, both of them interestingly based at Stanford University. I think they both still are. Most of their work was done there, but I think they are still based at Stanford in the States. These researchers, both ladies, have done really interesting work on mindset generally and specific types of mindset. So if you're interested in this, you can look them up. The first one we're going to draw on is a psychologist by the name of Carol Dweck. So she released a book in 2007, and I think it was just called Mindset, but you can look that up if that's something that interests you. And she's done a huge amount of research on mindset over the last 3-4 decades. And what she recognized as she was exploring this very specific part of human behavior, human psychology, which is how we position ourselves, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, is that people were kind of self-organizing into two different categories. So two different mindsets, you could call it. And like most things in psychology, it's often on a continuum. So it's not to say that you have completely one or the other, but often we find ourselves somewhere in between, and various aspects in different degrees. But for the most part, you can kind of see how people would find themselves in these two categories. And these mindsets, you might have heard of them at some point, is this idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So this is something we're going to speak about today, spend a bit of time with, and hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll have a good sense of what these different mindsets are and what the implications for them are. Okay. So the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. So ultimately what we're talking about is how we see our intelligence, our personality, our characters. Either we believe that it's something that can be developed, this would be a growth mindset, or we believe that we're kind of stuck with what we have. So my abilities are static, they're not dynamic, they are just what they are. So I'm this smart, I'll never be any smarter. And that's just the way that it is. That's a fixed mindset. The growth mindset says I have the ability to grow these certain aspects of myself. I understand that people are kind of different, and some people are inherently have higher IQ or intelligence than others. But I believe that there are aspects of my intelligence I can grow and I can become better. That's a growth mindset. These different mindsets have very big consequences for the way a person would face challenges, the way that they would process their failures, the way that they would think about failures or try to avoid failures, the way a person is able to grow, as you would imagine, or maybe the way that they get stuck and paralyzed by their fears, and where they're stagnant and where they're not able to achieve their potentials. Very real consequences for that. And one of the key premises of it is if you think, and you can kind of think about this example, if you think that you are limited to what you have right now, whatever that may be, might be your intelligence, might be your certain skills in different areas, problem solving, creativity, whatever it is. If you believe that that's kind of fixed and probably not going to change very much, one would often invest quite a lot of energy in proving that to the world, because obviously we're social creatures, right? And we're always positioning for status. So someone who believes that, well, this is how smart I am, they put a lot of their energy into proving how smart they are. Whereas someone who believes, well, yeah, I have this intelligence, and again, I know that people are varied, but I can, this is where I am right now, but I constantly see myself as this growing, evolving entity. That person is not going to put energy into performing for other people. They're going to put their energy into growing, because they believe that would be a better use of their energy. So you can already there see a big implication to how these different mindsets might affect the way we deal with challenges and adversity, but also how we're able to reach our potentials in life. So just to go through a few basic differences there, these are kind of the dichotomies, the different areas. And again, you'll probably find different areas of your life, you're somewhere in between. So you can say that someone is completely fixed in every area, 100% completely a growth mindset in different area, but it varies, and there's nuance and gray areas here. But ultimately, if we look at them and they're kind of just still simple, and in the simple positions, what we're looking at is fixed mindset is something like either I'm good at something or I'm not, whereas a growth mindset says I can learn to do anything that I want. Fixed mindset says this is who I am, I can't change it. Growth mindset says I'm constantly evolving, I'm a work in progress. Fixed mindset says if you have to work hard, you don't have the ability. This is an interesting implication as well, isn't it? Because it's kind of saying, if you have the ability, you actually don't have to work that hard. So work smart instead of working hard, something we hear a lot of. Whereas growth mindset says the more you actually challenge yourself, the smarter you can become. So you put yourself in positions that are uncomfortable, put yourself in positions where you might fail. That's how growth happens. Fixed mindset says if I don't try, I won't fail. I want to avoid failing, because again, I'm trying to manage how people see me, and I feel quite kind of exposed by the fact that these qualities I have are kind of all that there is, and I don't really want to be found out in that way. Whereas the growth mindset says, failing actually doesn't really matter that much, because I always believe that I can learn from it and grow from it. So I only fail when I stop trying. Fixed mindset says something like that job position totally beyond me, it's out of my league. Whereas a growth mindset is something like that looks challenging, let me push myself, and let me try to apply for it, see if I can stretch myself. Okay, so just to give you a further dive into what that might look like, people with the growth mindset would believe that their achievements are down to the effort, not just their talents. And we'll speak towards the end of this webinar about some of the research around that and how interesting it is to focus on the process as opposed to the outcome. But ultimately, a person with a growth mindset is saying the achievements that I get are not just this naturally born talent that I have. It's down to effort. And you can see that sometimes in a kind of self-deprecating way. Someone will say, yeah, I'm good at this, but, I'm just lucky that I'm good at it. I was just, I was born with it through no work of my own. Whereas someone with a growth mindset is going to say, well, actually, sure, there are inherent genetic properties, right, and things that don't control my environment, but my effort is something that I can take responsibility and give myself credit for. So a person with a growth mindset, similarly, they're more likely to learn from their mistakes. They're more likely to be engaged with that process of failure as opposed to trying to put up defenses and avoid it. They value criticism. A person with a growth mindset sees criticism as helpful feedback for growth. Uncomfortable places to be. It doesn't mean that someone with a growth mindset finds it comfortable or enjoyable, but they see the value. Again, they believe that intelligence varies, but it can be further developed. There are things we can do to meet our potential there. And then the implications are a person with a growth mindset can admit when they don't know something. So that's one of the biggest challenges in many workspaces, actually, is just saying, I don't know, because that's seen as failure. We're expected to know everything all the time. It's a completely unrealistic expectation, of course. A person with a growth mindset is more likely to seek out challenges. They're not going to just stay comfortable. They're going to actually look for the things that will put them in positions where they can grow. And also because they believe they have the potential to grow, challenges are not something completely overwhelming, but they're seen as opportunity. And this allows them to take more risks outside of their comfort zone. And as I'm sure everyone knows, this is where learning potential happens, is in the uncomfortable places. We often don't grow very much in comfort zones. And likewise can seek out new perspectives. So the mindset is not just linked to things like intelligence, creativity, other traits, but also the ability to kind of think about things in different ways and to develop our views as we receive new information and new feedback from the world, to think about things in different ways and to really kind of be flexible with our perspectives on things. And that in itself is, flexibility is a very key 21st century skill as well, because things are constantly changing and because there are all these constant opportunities where things are being done and just there's disruption. Things are being done in ways that they were never done before. If we're really rigid, we don't really have the mechanisms to deal with the landscape, which is completely changing and completely new. So the ability to change our perspectives, to think about things in different ways, is a really key part of navigating the 21st century workplace and environment generally. Okay, so on the other side of that, people with a fixed mindset, again, this is the extreme of this, but they're going to look something like, I'm either good at something or I'm bad at something. There's not much gray area. They're very, very quick to say, there's something I'll never be good at. I'm never going to be able to run. Never been a runner, hate running, never going to be able to do it. I'm hate reading, not good at reading, not something that I'll ever be able to do. Or I hate change. Change is something that drives me crazy. I'm never going to be able to do it. You see, that's a very fixed mindset. And already you can just feel how those statements just close the door on any type of potential for growth there. And likewise, good. It doesn't have to be bad necessarily. It can be, these are things that I'm really good at. And that's the other side of it. It can be fixed views, a fixed mindset on the things that we're good at, but also that the implication of that is, well, these are the things I'm good at, these are the things that I'm bad at, and the two things. So yeah, a big part of a fixed mindset, big aspect of that is not wanting to be found out. If people see the real me, they'll realize that I'm actually not good at this, and that'll always be the way it is. Or they'll see that this is the limit of my potential. They'll see my limitations. So there's a lot of work that goes into hiding it. So the defenses come up, and it's hard often for someone with a very fixed mindset to kind of operate authentically in the world, because that can feel very challenging. And likewise, they would avoid feedback and criticism. It's not seen as valuable, it's seen as again, comfortable situations are they're more likely to gravitate towards, because they are where less likely to be found out. They're safer, they don't require as much vulnerability. So fears, of course, then restrict opportunities for growth, because the fears become bigger than the potential that might be out there. Because things like failure start to become so overwhelming, and a lot of effort is put into avoiding it. And so, well, what's the point? If I believe that failure is likely, if I feel that I can't grow to meet this challenge, then it's actually better for me just to avoid it. And these are not necessarily true beliefs. Not to say that these system of beliefs actually reflect reality, right? It's just a mindset. It's just a way of thinking about something that actually might not be true. Because, for example, this person with a very fixed mindset, they might have all of the opportunity and the potential to grow, but because they believe they don't, they never put themselves in those situations. They never kind of operate and build in a way where they're looking to get some feedback to allow them to grow. They're more likely to operate in the world in a way that they can avoid feedback, avoid criticism, avoid discomfort, avoid failure, for all the reasons there. And then this can be really really intimidating, thinking about success of other people, because there's always this comparison going on. These fixed qualities that we have, or this person's better at it than I am, and where it is. This can then feel like success is a zero-sum game. So someone I know is doing really well, that feels like I'm losing out on something. That's a normal human feeling. I think a lot of people feel that. And that is an example in this situation of a fixed mindset. And it's always very, very worthwhile catching that. And again, you can catch it without the judgment. It's always not to say you need to judge yourself feeling that way. Again, these are normal human reactions. We're social beings, and sometimes we have these irrational beliefs about our interactions with each other. But recognizing that wishing well for other people doesn't take anything away from us. And if we can put that effort into actually developing ourselves, and that energy into developing ourselves, and believing that we have areas that we can develop and can grow, and we don't feel as threatened by people's success. Okay. And then finally, a person with a fixed mindset is more likely to accept the things that they can control. So you've heard this truism, I'm sure, at some point, the wisdom of accepting what we can't control. I think that's the serenity prayer. Originally, there's different versions of this. It finds itself into self-help all the time. It's in the Alcoholics Anonymous step as well. I think that's where the serenity prayer comes from. It's a really useful tool in psychology and therapy generally, but this idea that we change the things that we can control, and we accept the things that we can't, and we find the wisdom to know the difference between the two. That's the serenity prayer, I believe. So that's really important, taking ownership of what we can control, and not worrying about what we can't control, because so much of the time our anxieties, fears, and our unnecessary irrational worries are tied to worrying about things outside of our control. But we don't have to accept the things that we can control. That's passivity. That's not acceptance. And knowing the difference is so important to say, actually, these things are in my control. I can choose how much in a certain situation. I can choose how much I invest in this area of my life. I can choose what I do with my time. I can choose the way I think about myself. I can choose my mindset. These are all things that I can control. When I start saying well, that's just the way it is, I'm never going to be good at that, or I'm never going to like that, that's something I'm never going to be able to do, that fixed mindset then is not acceptance, that's passivity. I hope that distinction makes sense, and it's a really, really important one. Okay, so just to go through this quickly now as well, and then I'm going to move off these two mindsets, but just to give you a final run through it and how the process works, I'll take the fixed mindset first. Again, this is based on the work of Carol Dweck, fascinating researcher. There's so much interesting stuff that she's done. I'm going to expose you to some of her research towards the end of this, but I really would recommend you looking into her work if you're interested in this idea of mindset generally, and these two mindsets. So fixed mindset, intelligence is static. That means it doesn't move. It is what it is. This leads to the desire to look smart. And that means that for the reasons we discussed, if you feel like, well, this is all I have, you put that energy performing. So then this person then avoids challenges. They give up more easily. They see efforts as fruitless or even worse, as proof of a lack of ability. They will then ignore useful negative feedback, so the things that are hard to hear, that are kind of shut out to protect themselves from, whether it's through denial or projecting into something else, and then again feel really threatened by the success of others, and as a result, they're more likely to plateau early, so they're not going to reach the same type of potential that you could imagine someone with the growth mindset would. And this is a very deterministic view of the world, so it is what it is. There's not much I can do to change. Okay. As opposed to a growth mindset, this leads to desire to learn as opposed to perform. So because you're focused on learning, what you're looking at is embracing challenges, persisting in the face of setback, not just giving up, seeing effort as something that's really valuable process, the value in the process, learning from the difficult criticism, doesn't mean you like it, finding lessons and inspiration in the success of others. So as opposed to being threatened by their success, because that comes from that fixed mindset of I'll never be able to do it. Growth mindset said that there's so much inspiration there. I might not even have what the person has, but I can use these lessons in different areas of my life. As a result, that type of person is more likely to achieve higher levels of achievement. And they see the world as less deterministic and more about free will. So there's things that I can do, there's choices I can make that can change the way that things are. Okay. Peter Devi, those are interesting questions you're asking. I'm going to pause on them now and ask you to ask them again at the end, just because they're quite, well, I'll answer the second one quickly. In terms of the organization, I want to come back to that, so please just keep it for the end. But the second question is, how do we analyze if we are a fixed growth mindset person? So I'm hoping just by going through these examples, you're starting to get some sense for it. If you find yourself not necessarily relating to either, do some work on it, do some reflection, do some journaling on it, do some exercises of self-exploration to try to see, do some more reading on it, go to counseling if you want to explore that. And as I said, you're probably going to find that it's not you one or the other in every area of your life. You probably find in certain areas you have very fixed mindsets, in certain areas you have very growth mindsets. So just being able to look at yourself through this specific lens is a way of answering this question. You might be able to do by yourself, you might need some third-party help as well. Okay. So I spoke about the two researchers that I was going to use today, and Carol Dweck was the first one. The second one, also a female psychologist from Stanford, is Alia Crum. So she's got some really interesting work and research she does as well in her lab. And what we're going to look at today, some of her work on stress and how minds affect stress. Okay. I'm just going to quickly have a look. I'll see there's another question that came through. Yeah, okay, good. I'll come back to those ones. Okay, so just thinking about stress and how mindset and stress, this is a practical way of thinking about the implications of mindset. So the way we have historically approached stress in psychology is to think about appraisal, this concept of appraisal. So appraisal means there is a what we call a stressor out there, so something that's causing the stress. It might be internal, belief or fear that we have. It might be external, deadline coming, car racing towards us, worry about a loved one, whatever that is. That's the stressor. But obviously people react to stress in different ways, and this comes down to this idea of appraisal. So what does appraisal mean? Well, we appraise it, we kind of assess it, we analyze it, we have this filter that any type of stressor goes through, and that's us asking, how scared should I be of this? What does it mean to me? This deadline coming up, am I worried that my procrastination is going to get in the way? Am I worried that I'm going to fail because I failed before and this is going to make me even more stressed? Or do I praise it and say, well, this is just, every week I'm going to have deadlines. It's just another one. They've all been fun in the past. That appraisal is going to lead to a lot of kind of lower levels of stress. So this is a kind of common way of thinking about how we approach stress, and it has its utility. But we can go a step further than that. And this is what a lot of Crum's work is around, is what is our mindset like towards stress itself? So how do we actually think about this concept of stress? You can ask yourself this right now. What is your mindset towards stress? How do you think about about stress itself, this idea of stress. And you probably find as you're answering it, you're thinking things like it's negative, or it's scary, or it's debilitating. And some people will be thinking things like, well, yeah, it's bad, but it's also normal. It depends how you manage it, depends what you do with it. These are just different examples of the mindset towards stress. But overall, what we find when people think about their mindsets towards stress is there is some resistance there to it. There's this kind of negative association with this idea of stress. And the reason for that is because public health messaging has for decades been telling us how bad it is for our health. And that's true. They haven't been lying to you. Stress can be really bad for your health. Chronic stress can be really detrimental. It can raise your blood pressure significantly, make you much more likely to get chronic illnesses when you're in that constant stress, arousal, fight or flight mode. So yeah, there's truth to that. However, because that's kind of been the messaging as trying to get people to manage their stress, often what's happened is that the mindset people have towards stress is that it is bad. And when that happens, then we start to get this feedback loop, this other layer, which, well, then I need to be stressed about feeling stressed, because now I'm feeling stressed and my job is stressful and I'm always stressful, and now I'm always feeling stressed, and now I need to actually worry because I'm always stressed. You become stressed about being stressed, and then this feeds into it, right? Oh, now I'm even more stressed. And that can be a really difficult spiral to get caught into. So being aware of that is so important, to be able to say, okay, or maybe there are different mindsets that I can have towards stress that will probably put a little bit less pressure on me. So what does that look like? There's some really interesting comments coming through, and I'm going to come back to them. I'm going to come back to them. I just want to finish this part on stress, but I am really interested in what you guys are saying, and I am paying attention with heart and eye to those. But I'm going to return to it in a moment. Okay, so what does an alternative mindset to stress look like? While we're on this point, well, it's non-judgmental, and this is such an important part of having a healthy relationship with ourselves and our internal psychological experience generally, is just suspending judgment, not having that really value description that we put on everything we do. You know, this is bad. I shouldn't be feeling this way, or this is weak. This is a sign of me not being good enough. Those are all judgments. They're so detrimental. It is possible to observe ourselves, to be aware of ourselves, to take responsibility for the parts of ourselves that we control without any judgment. So you can be mindful of that in a stressful situation. You can just be curious about it. What does it feel like to be stressed? Again, we're going to speak about this concept of mindfulness later in the month, and this is really what it focuses on. This very, very specific aspect here of just being able to be curious about our experience without the judgment. Just to say, okay, well, I'm actually feeling, I've been feeling really overwhelmed about this webinar that I'm doing next week. Every time I think about it, I start to get this anxious feeling, butterflies in my stomach start to expire. This means that I'm not very good at my job, because if I was, I wouldn't be feeling this way, and no one else feels this way when they have to do webinars and see all these other people doing them so easy, but yet here I am feeling stressed. That's judgment. As opposed to saying, okay, that's really interesting that every time I think about it, I have this reaction. What does that mean? What does that feel like? That's a mindset towards stress that's without judgment, and it's just acknowledging it, acknowledging that it's there, and it's acknowledging it's a very normal part of being human, is to feel stressed about something. And we can unpack that stress to take it from a negative to a positive if we are creative about that. So you can say, well, why am I stressed? Maybe the first thing that comes to my mind, well, I don't want to look like an idiot. Doing this, maybe a public speech that you're doing in front of 1,000 people, I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to fail. I don't want people to think I'm stupid. These are just building up the stress, right? It's always these, negative consequences. What if they happen? But you can ask yourself, well, why does that matter? Why are you doing this in the first place? And you might start to get to questions. Those questions might get to places like, well, this is something that really interests me, or I'm really passionate about it. I really, I want to do well at this. I want to share this information that I have. And you're then repackaging that from a really negative, what if I fail, as opposed to, this is something that I have that I want to share, and it means something to me. That's why I care. That's why I'm feeling stressed, is because the way that goes is important for these reasons. you can unpack that to a point that can be actually a lot more. Okay. And then finally, utilize it. It's such an important part of performing generally anyway. And high performance athletes tend to use this. A lot of people who are performing highly in most areas of their life are able to use their stress, not get debilitated by it. So they have good mechanisms for dealing with it. So it's not overwhelming them, but they can take that stress and they can say, okay, well, let me feel this feeling of adrenaline that I have right now, and let me allow that to help me perform. Let me understand that it's normal to be feeling this way. This is just, again, sign of my humanity. I'm a human being. I'm ultimately, running on the level of a chimpanzee in many areas of my brain, that might be. And I have these things for me that are going to feel things at certain times, and one of those might be stress. And I can use that stress as a way of focusing my attention, of allowing me to perform kind of shutting out the noise and focusing on this, so allowing it to focus my energy towards preparation, find the motivation in it, whatever it might be. There's utility in the stress. Okay, so we're going to go into just a few real life examples and examples of the research that's been done on this, just in closing. Yeah, so just a few of the comments that are coming through that I think were interesting. I'm going to go through them now, just so we don't lose them before the end. But you can feel free to ask any questions towards the end as well. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through all of them, just some here. Yeah, so it's just a student number, not a name, but I think this is really insightful. Although I have qualities of a growth mindset, I'm fixed in some areas. So this is helpful, again, think about it this way. So the examples that were given there is not to worry about things I can't change. So, for example, SARS, petrol price, and so on. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think just to be able to see the different areas of, this is where I have a growth mindset, this is where I don't, and this is where I'm able to just let go of the things that I have control over. Naomi, a good point about organizational dynamics as well in cultures. A fixed mindset will only push a certain amount of product in organizations. So yeah, that relates to certain types of performance work-wise. If you're in business development or sales, that type of thing, having a growth mindset, of course, is helpful in terms of the ability to grow the business. Maile, challenges are coming in different ways in our lives. We're going to put both the mindset instead of growth. Accepting challenges, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm liking this. It seems like you guys are getting it. Keep the comments coming. We're gonna address some of them just when we go to the Q&A in a few minutes. Thank you again for those. So the first idea of a real life example of how we can facilitate a growth, or how a growth mindset can be facilitated, is this is a university, and I think it was Texas. And I think Harold Dweck gives this example of how they, instead of saying, actually, I think it was a high school, not a university, but instead of saying passed or failed on their report cards at the end of the semester and the end of the year, they either had passed or not yet. So you can see the difference there between not yet and failed or didn't pass, right? Not yet speaks to the potential for growth. It says, yeah, you're not there yet, but that doesn't mean you won't be there. And that is facilitating, growth mindset. You can see how these optimal schooling systems lock us into a fixed mindset as well about our abilities and academic abilities, and to be able to think creatively about it in the way that these academics and educators have, how hopeful that is, and how it can redefine our relationship with failure, which is to say, failure is a temporary, it's a temporary process, temporary experience, this experience of failure. It is not a constant thing that I carry around with me for the rest of my life, unless I choose to. So that's one example. Another one, and this is a big part of it, if any of you have kids, this is helpful. If any of you are in leadership positions, or any of you are in academic positions where you're kind of teaching, learning, it's really interesting to think about this difference between intelligence versus efforts. So again, the effort we put in as opposed to the actual outcome. Research that was done, this is in the States, they gave fifth graders, so these are like 10-year-olds, and they gave them two tests. Firstly, the test they did based on how they, whatever their results were, the remarks that they got, very targeted, was either things like, well done, you're so smart, or you're really clever, you're so good at this. That was the one. But in that example, they're praising intelligence. In the other group, they praised their effort. So you must have worked really hard for this, or you really did well at figuring that out. So you're praising the effort. You really applied yourself there, or you really sacrificed your time to do well at this. You can see the difference there between praising intelligence and praising effort. And what they found when they gave them a second test and made it harder, made sure that they did actually experience some level of failure, is that the group that the effort was praised were much more likely to try again, to go home, to learn from the experience. Whereas those praised for their intelligence were more likely to take the step back personally. So if you think about it, if you're praising me for my intelligence and I do well, that feels great. But if you praise me for my intelligence and then I fail, that means that I must be not good enough, and that's just the way that it is. That's the fixed mindset. So you can see how these mindsets can get facilitated. And if some of you are asking in a question, how do you go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? You either have these types of formative experiences in life, environmentally, from your parents, your caregivers, school, depending on all of that. And if you don't, you might find that you grow up with a fixed mindset. And being aware of that means you can actually start to, in a way, reparent yourself, which is you can have these types of self dialogues, which is to praise yourself for the work that you're putting in, to remind yourself that growth is possible, to remind yourself that this exercise or this metric or this test is not necessarily all that you are. So yeah, the importance of praising process, not outcome, and then you can praise specifically as well. And again, this can be directed towards children, it can be directed towards adults in a teaching learning situation, it can be directed in the workplace, can also be directed internally. So we can praise specifically, and what that means, instead of saying well done, you've done so well. For example, you can think of a child, well done, you really went out of your comfort zone here to do that, or I know this wasn't easy for you. You really showed a lot of courage in being. So you're praising specifically, and that's developing that growth mindset. Okay, another example, also in an academic space. It's a test was given to 10-year-olds, similar type of sample size, sample A. And the point of this test again was that it was just too hard for them. It was meant to be difficult. They were meant to struggle at it. And again, they kind of self-categorized into two different groups. But some of them were saying things like, I love a challenge. This was hard, but wow, it really pushed me. That's the growth mindset. Some responded with dismay and despair. I can't do it. I'm not good enough. This is too hard for me. I'm not big enough for it. You can kind of see that fixed mindset there. And then they did MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging, on these children to see what was happening in their brains at the time. And those who were seeing the failure as personal, those who kind of had what you'd see as a more fixed mindset, nothing really happened neurologically in their brain. They were already over it. They were on with the next. They were moving on. Whereas those that experienced failure as a challenge and were stimulated by it, their brains were on fire with engaging with the problem and trying to think about it differently. So how could I go back and do that in a different way? You can just see there again that difference between the two, and that borne out by the research. Okay, another one is a very famous experiment done in 2011 called the milkshake study. So what happened in this one is that they gave the same milkshake to people, two different groups of people, but they gave them the same milkshake. Essentially, the milkshake inside was the same. I hope this is making you too angry at all of us one. What they found, they had two different labels on this same milkshake. One of them was saying how decadent and sugar loaded this milkshake was, so how rich it was, and no holds were barred in terms of the quality of the ice cream and the sugar that was in the chocolate that was in it. Whereas the other one was framed as a diet milkshake, so something that was really low calorie and meant to be, the healthier option. The milkshakes were the same, the labels were different. They gave these people these milkshakes. What they found was that there were differences in Greenland and the people who were having these milkshakes. So those of them, that had the certain label, again, same milkshake, but different label that said, this is a really high calorie, rich, decadent milkshake. We're having different levels of ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, than those that weren't. So the difference was those that were having the one that said it was richer were actually having high levels of ghrelin, which was saying you're not as hungry. They were feeling less hungry because they were believing that the thing they were having was richer. Whereas those that were having the thing that was exactly the same, the milkshake that was exactly the same, believed that it was lower in calories, were feeling more hungry at the end of it just because of that, the mindset they had towards the food that they're eating. And you can think about the implications this has for dieting, right? Healthy eating. If we tell ourselves that we're depriving ourselves, if our mindset is one of restriction, we're taking away food from ourselves, or I'm eating the healthy option for lunch today, our bodies are actually responding in a very physical way in terms of our hormonal response, which is to say, I'm actually hungrier because of it, not just because of the calories that are going into my body, but the fact that I believe that it has less calories makes me hungry. And this might give you some idea of why dieting is so hard and how we're so bad at it. So just again, being aware of the mindset we have towards these things, how can we really have changes in our bodies themselves. You can see this as well. I'll give you this as a last example before we go into a Q&A, or almost a Q&A, but I think one more slide after this. But another example was research done with hotel maids in New York City. So these are hotel maids, I think 4 of them that they used in the study. They are up and down stairs all day long, as you see in the picture, changing bed sheets, carrying out dirty laundry and cleaning under beds, and really physically demanding work. However, when they're asked about the exercise, 67%, 2/3 of them said they actually don't exercise, despite the fact that they were exercising all day long, but because they were doing in terms of their work, they didn't see it as exercise, capital E. So what they did then is they said, okay, well, let's take this group of 84 maids, and they did this full workup on them. They measured their body fat, their weights to hip ratio, blood pressure, and their body mass index. They measured all of those things, and they took one group of them and they educated them on the benefits of exercise. So they said to them, you are actually exercising all day long. And not only is that good for you, these are all the reasons why it's good for you. This is what public health says about it, and why all the benefits you're getting that you didn't actually know in terms of your mental health, in terms of your heart function, your cardiac functioning, your fitness, longevity. They educated them on all of these benefits of it. And then the other group, they just left. They just left them to carry on doing their work. They didn't say anything. There was no intervention. Control group. And what happened is they measured them again after a month, and they found that those who had been exposed to the education on the benefits of exercise they were actually doing showed significant decreases in their blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, their weight to hip ratio, and 10% drop in their general blood pressure. So these are significant changes in their bodies just from the fact that they had different information that shifted their mindset towards their jobs themselves. And you can take a moment to sit and think with that as well. Anything that we're doing, whether we're studying, or whether we're working, whether we're just doing something difficult, or we're going through a difficult time, how significant the mindset that we have towards that is that it's actually, again, going to have hormonal, physical manifestations now in our bodies as well. And there was no change in behavior here. No one did anything differently. They checked that. They were doing exactly the same stuff as before, and same stuff as the control group, and nothing changed. Okay, so those are just some research. There's a lot of really interesting stuff out there. You can look it up more. Again, the work of Carol Dweck and Maria Crum, both really interesting researchers doing a lot of interesting work on this. You can look up. They got a lot of studies there. I'm going to go to the Q&A now, just to kind of remind you there are different aspects of mindsets as well. Gratitude versus grievance. A gratitude mindset is I'm grateful for what I have, as opposed to I wish that I had more, or I'm missing this. A solution versus problem mindset. You can see this when people are problem solving, how they're focusing on all the things that are wrong, and you give them a suggestion, they tell you all the things that are going wrong with that. That can be handy in some types of risk analysis. Some people find it helpful in their jobs, but ultimately that can be quite difficult in terms of actually coming up with solutions, which is to say, well, let me not focus on wrong, let me focus on how we solve this problem. And then also scarcity versus abundance mindset. So this is beyond the scope of the webinar to go into detail on any one of these, but just to give you an idea of these different types of mindsets as well. Scarcity is there's not very much. We think about this with money a lot of the time. I don't know when it's coming again. I need to hold on to it. I need to guard it as opposed to abundance. It's enough for everybody. I don't need to compete. I don't need to. I don't need to be jealous about other people's success. So those are just a few types of mindset as well. Just to give you a sense, maybe you can recognize yourself or others with some of those. Okay, good. That's it. We have a couple of minutes to go, so let's open up for some questions. I saw some questions coming through. I wasn't able to get to all of them, but if you haven't had them answered, please put them in now. You can put them in the Q&A. I'll try and monitor that as well. So just again, we do offer support for anyone who needs help with psychological support. You can email counseling@regents.ac.za if you want to set up an appointment. That's completely free for Regents students. Alexander asking what's the treatment to all this. So I think, again, just being aware of it, as some of you have shared, being aware of the type of mindset that you have, that allows you then to know what you need to focus on, where the areas for development are. I mean, once you have that, you might be able to kind of, again, self-talk yourself into growing these areas of yourself. The mindset that feels fixed, you might be able to shift yourself out of that. You might need some third-party help. You might need to see someone to help you, to go through that. But it is possible to change these mindsets. It's just a system of beliefs. How do you handle some of the history of mental issues? That's a big question. Unfortunately, I can't get into that now. But I would suggest email me or email counseling at Regent, and that's something we can set up some time to talk about. Just because there's no kind of one way how to do that. Thank you guys for your comments. Appreciate them. Maxwell, is it possible for a person who's very educated to have a fixed mindset? Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, again, fixed mindset doesn't mean the person's fixed in their abilities. You could imagine someone who's smart and believes that they're smart, believes they're good at academics, and they're able to really use that to grow in that area. But they might still have a fixed mindset and be limited in other areas. So yeah, absolutely, that is possible. Marcela, there is a copy of this will be on the Regent YouTube channel towards the end of the week. So all of this information will be there. This whole presentation will be there. Bogani asking, in a work environment, what could be the remedy of fixed mindset employees? So that's a tough one. You probably need some type of structured intervention, but just being aware of that culture and where it comes from, I guess, would be a good starting point. Yeah, so just being aware of that, I guess, and then you probably need some type of tailor-made intervention based on that. But yeah, I would suggest consulting with a professional facilitating that would be helpful. Okay, yeah, thank you guys. I'm getting all of those comments. Appreciate your participation. Okay, let's take 2 more questions. Can we change the mindset based on circumstances at the time? Yeah, so I mean, it is possible to change your mindset. The only way you change your mindset, the most effective way of changing your mindset is being aware of what your mindset is in the first place, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be some kind of ad hoc evolution that might or might not work. Just being aware at the same time is important, regardless of what the circumstances are. Having that awareness is really important. Okay, last question I'm going to answer here. Can failure phobia result to mixed mindset? Absolutely, yeah. So fear of failure is very much an aspect of a fixed mindset. Okay. Yeah. Victor, when one feels the whole world is against them, what sort of mindset is that? I would suggest that's a victim mindset. A victim feels that they have no choices. There are real victims in the world. There are people who are really victimized, but once the victimization is over, they're stopping the victim and start being a survivor, and they start to have choices available again to them. And that's what a victim mindset looks like. I don't believe they do. Okay, good. I think that's it. Last one, Jabalani, is this the type of thing that can be taught at school? I feel education's current forms outdated. Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely the type of thing that should be, right? I certainly think that would be helpful. Yes, I'd agree with that. I don't see why this couldn't be taught at school. Okay, guys, thank you very much again. I really enjoyed your comments and your participation. It was great. Again, the recording is available towards the end of the week on the YouTube channel. Any counseling requests, you can get us on counseling with Regent at AC.za. And we are back again towards the end of the month. So that's 3 weeks from today with mindfulness. So thank you so much, guys. And we will see you all in 3 weeks. Thank you again for your participation. Have a great day.